You're a successful man, high-profile entrepreneur. How important was your wife in sort of?
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
We've been together since we were.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. You're in a relationship?
President Spinelli, I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity to interview you.
To tell the story is always a thrill, but to tell it to a trusted alum and a friend is even better.
I appreciate that. The focus of today's video is to interview you about your Jiffy Lube journey, how you got into this business. Before we dive into that, my first question is walk me through your upbringing and then walk me through where you sort of developed this business acumen.
Lower middle class upbringing, Italian-American family, Springfield, Massachusetts, maybe 90 miles from Babson. Went to public schools and then got a very interesting opportunity to go to a private school scholarship. That led to a scholarship to college, a little college in Maryland called McDonalds College, where my high school football coach went to school, and he helped get me a scholarship there.
I see.
I'm not sure at the time I would have called it a network effect, but I learned that sort of the sociology of your life is a set of intimate relationships, and how you build and manage those relationships have a pretty dramatic impact on the experience you're having, but also the trajectory of your life. Well, I think I got mostly lucky through that. It helped me learn how to try to build relationships, how important building relationships was. But it was an important component to my sort of journey. But it also became a very important part of the Jiffy Lube story, which was bizarre when I say it out loud. I don't think of that whole track very often, but my college football coach at Little McDaniel College. I ended up captain of the football team. I was proud of that.
Oh, which position?
What do you think?
Quarterback?
Oh, that's very good. I was a running back.
Running back? Oh,
yeah.
Oh, that's a good position.
My principal capability was toughness. I just hit anybody, anytime. But my football coach had a strange trajectory too. He was a retired entrepreneur. He retired at 40.
Wow.
Making a fortune in the conversion of not-for-profit nursing homes into for-profit nursing homes. He continued to own a bunch of them, but went into coaching because he loved football.
Wow.
And he was my coach.
Okay.
Convoluted story, huh? He recruited players to work for him.
Okay.
So he had a nursing home in Baltimore. McDaniel is in Maryland. And I went and I was a nursing home administrator. I graduated Saturday night and went to the nursing home.
Wow.
Which is a little weird for a 22-year-old to go, it was a free room in the nursing home, but not very exciting, I can tell you. But an incredible experience. 300-bed nursing home in Baltimore. Didn't have a clue. And he said, well, manage the best you can. We'll see.
300 bed.
Yeah, it was a big nursing home. As the assistant administrator, I lived there. It was very operational. Are all the rooms clean? Are they filled? Who are they filled with? Do we have the right paperwork? What is the payment stream? What's the pro forma on this? Are we controlling expenses? All of that, I was 22. I'm learning like 3 minutes before I got to make a presentation what the heck any of that meant. But it was a terrific experience, very intense, and he was tough as a nail. So you had to deliver, and you knew that. He had 3 or 4 of us, and he said, I think you're the A team. or you made the team. Yeah. He was very much an entrepreneur. So, let's start a business. And we were, at that time, it's almost funny, we were thinking about electric cars. This was like 1979.
Okay.
So we're 1980. We're thinking about electric cars or solar energy, and saw that as probably premature. But he went out to Ogden, Utah to look at a solar energy deal and bumped into Jiffy Lube. It was an existing 2-store chain doing a bunch of cars, was intrigued by it, and said, this is super cool. And it's super cool and doing a lot of business in Ogden, Utah. What could it do in Boston, Massachusetts, where there's a lot of cars?
Yeah.
So, first lesson, market demand is the only key component you have for a business. We went out there, we bought it. He mostly bought it. I got a loan. I scraped together a few dollars from friends or family, that kind of thing, bought shares. And I moved to Ogden, Utah to learn how to run a Jiffy Lube and how to build an operations manual. Very complicated model, but replicable. McDonald's is replicable. What do you really have? You have a brand. So to build a brand, we had to grow. To grow fast, we needed capital.
Yes.
Franchising. and we decided we would franchise. None of us had any experience in franchising at the time.
Including the coach?
Including Coach. He was a terrific entrepreneur and cute. He had a interesting ability to be an acute manager and have a vision. He'd see the horizon pretty clearly, and we're all saying, man, it looks cloudy to me. And he'd say, no, that's where we're going.
Wow.
But he could take the next step, too.
Mm-hmm.
But he was very special that way.
Remind me what his name was again?
Jim Hindman, Hindman, Coach, for short. Moving to Ogden, Utah was a fabulous experience for me, taking me out of my comfort zone. What we try to do in education at Babson, colliding with the realities, thought and action, so think deeply, act decisively kind of mentality. When you immerse yourself in that environment, you get up early and go change oil, and then at night write it up. What happened today in the stores, and how do we formalize this process to gain efficiencies, create a business model that's replicable across all 50 states in the United States, and then we're going to go internationally. That's the sort of the Jim Hindman discipline of today and vision for tomorrow. We did that, moved back to Baltimore to help get the franchise started. You have to file all the stuff, and I was now the Jiffy Lube expert because I had spent a year changing oil. We did that, and then after a while I said, I think there's more money as a franchisee. And so I moved back to Massachusetts, and I built the franchises in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York.
Wow.
Did that for a bunch of years and then sold it.
Okay.
And then, yay.
Wow. Okay. Wow, that's super interesting. Are you comfortable sharing like the numbers behind it? For example, the first store you guys bought, like, are you able to share like how much you guys bought it for?
It's interesting because it gets lost in the fog of time. I don't remember the exact numbers. It wasn't, by today's standards, would have seemed like a rounding error. You could build a store back then for probably, and you had to dig out a big basement, and there was a lot to it. Could probably build one for $750,000, maybe less. Now it's $3 million, maybe more. The economics have changed so dramatically. The metrics are interesting because it did teach me the acute understanding of the business model has key drivers. For Jiffy Lube, it was how many cars per day, how much man hours or person hours per car to service, and at what price. When we focused on those three things and got super good at that, so productivity just skyrockets, margins expand, pricing power gets better. And it just taught me what are the critical organs of a business model that I got to take care of. Heart, lung, brain. If you got a hangnail, okay, fix it. Or if you break a finger, you got to fix it. It hurts. But make sure you don't have a heart attack.
Yeah.
Let's get the really strong heart, big muscles, a vibrant brain. My liver's got to work. The vital organs of a business. And I've taken that to everything I've done is to say, what are the vital organs that we are going to make sure are super healthy in this? And we're going to take care of everything else, but we're going to focus. And Jiffy Lube really helped me do that. It was called Jiffy Lube Inc. The trade name was Jiffy Lube. The company name was Jiffy Lube Inc. So we bought the assets of the company. We didn't want to buy the liabilities and all that. So we had to change the corporate name. We owned Jiffy Lube, but we had to change the corporate name from Jiffy Lube Inc. And so we're sitting around, and we had this thing where you poured a glass of bourbon. We would discuss the name or any problem, but we had to make a decision by the time we finished the bourbon. So you'd sip really slow, or but another lesson, you got to make decisions, and if you don't have timelines and discipline around making decisions, you can get caught in conversations forever. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend the bourbon methodology, although I think bourbon is a terrific product. Discipline was super important. But this was a funny one because we poured a bourbon. First guy says, I think we should call it Jiffy Lube International. We started laughing. We said, we got 2 stores in Ogden, Utah, man. Yeah, but where are we thinking? We said, we're done. That's Jiffy Lube International. So we renamed it Jiffy Lube International, thinking that we had to grow this. There was a clear growth mentality around it, and that there was no end to the growth. And we started mapping what are the 30 largest standard metropolitan statistical areas. How would we measure a trade area within that? How would we attack a trade area? How much would it cost? What was the capital needed to do that? Because we got to get the United States covered, then we got to have an international store to prove our name, and those kinds of things. So we went into it with a vision that we're going to have to build out several thousand stores. And even at that time, say at $1 million a store, that's a couple of $1 billion of capital.
Yes.
You know, the coach was a rich man. I don't know how much money he had, to be honest. Wasn't a couple $1 billion, I can tell you. So, you know, franchising was a great way to get capital too. So grow fast, get capital, build a brand.
So I'm not sure how relevant. One of my favorite books growing up was The Founder by Ray Kroc.
Yeah.
And-
Love it.
Yeah.
Oh.
And one thing that always stuck with me, because I read this book when I was in high school, so I didn't quite fully comprehend it, but one thing
Yeah.
that always stuck with me, his whole thing was franchising the real estate of McDonald's. Was that relevant to you?
Super interesting lesson from I read the book too. My favorite quote from Ray Kroc is green and growing or ripe and rotting. It's interesting. I still own a bunch of Jiffy Lube real estate.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, and it's been 100 years. You
Wow.
know? So, what do you think funded my academic career?
Oh.
We sold the company to Pennzoil, got bought by Shell, and they leased the property, and they renew leases. They sometimes buy the property from us, but we've been managing Jiffy Lube real estate for now 30 years. That's a nice income stream. Mm-hmm. The real estate became an important part of the personal wealth building, frankly. So we sold the company, kept the real estate. Yeah, it was
Super interesting.
That was fun.
Oh, we don't have too much time.
How does that whole experience link to Babson? For me, that was a really intimate lesson I learned. Thought and action, which came later in the philosophy of Babson, but it struck me very early. We were early on, at some level, struggling. I decided I was going to do the franchise side of it, moved back to Massachusetts. It's hard. I don't have the corporate environment anymore, and the coach,
Yeah.
you know, you're big shot, Steve, go make it happen. And I said, wow, this is hard. You know, how do you get the debt for the land? It was, now I got to really grow. And I decided I didn't know enough and that I should get an MBA. I drew a radius around Springfield, 90 miles. Any farther than that would have been harder to get there and back and all of that. And Babson was the only school that taught entrepreneurship at the time. So I did every Wednesday night for 7 years to get the MBA. But I directly connected the coursework I was taking to the problems I was having in the business. So I would think deeply, and then the next morning, let's go do it. And that made such an impact on me. That connective tissue, that it wasn't learn a whole bunch and go do, but learn and do and learn and do. We want you to put the thought into action now. We want you to grow with that. Those are intimate bedfellows that are going to make you a great leader. The Jiffy Lube experience combined with the Babson MBA taught me that model and use it. It's been terrific.
Very good insight.
I am so committed to that. And frankly, it's worked so well for me. But I see it all the time with my Babson colleagues and my friends who are, the best entrepreneurs are thirsty for knowledge. They are begging for it. You think you can't absorb anymore and they want more. And they learn how to take that and put it into action. And they measure fanatically.
So besides this idea of thinking deeply and then immediately taking action, what are some other important business lessons you have that you would want to share to the world?
Yeah, again, learning from the coach. Team building and relationship building is the same phenomenon. Organizational development is a human phenomenon. If you're not building a team, if you're not building relationships, you're limiting yourself. The better the nature of the relationship, one-on-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many, the better that structure, the more robust, the more action-oriented, the more they absorb thought and action and the imperative of creating value, the bigger and better you can be. Yeah. I used to think of scale as, well, how many stores with how many customers, how many cars, how many oil changes a year they'll have.
Yep.
Now I think of it as human infrastructure. If you and I are great partners, we'll figure out how to serve a need out there. Jiffy Lube now does tire rotations, and they're measuring the market in very different ways than I measured, because they have teams who looked at market demand and said, we can do this together. The teams build, great teams in relationship building, build scale, and the greater opportunity to create value. It's a big lesson for me. Transitioning
to a slightly different topic, but it's something, I'm not sure how much you want to share, but this is something I'm personally super curious about. You're a successful man, high-profile entrepreneur. I'm super curious, how important was your wife in sort of...
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, helping you become who you are today?
Well, why is that interesting?
So that's interesting to me because...
You're in a relationship?
Yeah.
Doing some evaluation.
I know successful people, right? And I hear mixed things. A lot of people say, you know, I've been with the same girl who's been with me since I was poor, and then all the way now I'm with the same girl. And then my other successful friends are like, don't focus on women right now. Focus on building your empire first, and then, you know, you can pick and choose. So I'm just
Yeah,
curious,
well,
like,
that's it. Really interesting. I don't know that I made a choice. It happened.
Okay.
You know, we've been together since we were 19.
oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's 1,000 years. You know, or almost roughly. We got married when we were 23.
Wow.
So we've been married for 47 years. We've been married a long
Wow.
time. So it worked. but we are, both of us came from very modest backgrounds. She's super bright, at least classically defined by grade. She was salutatorian. Second, is that? Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, you weren't salutatorian?
Unfortunately.
Me either. But she was second in her class in college, first in her class in high school, has a master's degree. She's a musician, very different mind. That support system became a source of strength. So, you know, I could lose money, but I still got her. Was not a bad, you know, or I could make more money and I have her. But the money became secondary to the relationship. I think that is important. But for me, I don't know if it is for you. I don't know it is for someone else. But that has been just a super important part. She's also incredibly understanding. We were talking about this a few months ago when we talk about how you build a relationship and where you have to be tolerant. She's much more centered on the home. It's an important part of the kids and the grandchildren, and it is to me too, but she's really, she's the sort of the rock around that.
Definitely.
We've lived in 22 different homes. You have to be flexible and to have that philosophy and say, okay, we're going to move. We lived in London when I did my doctorate. We lived in Utah. We moved back to Maryland. We moved up to Massachusetts. We moved to New York, went back over to London, came to Boston. So we've lived in a lot of places, and having a partner that is supportive of making sure that it's comfortable and that you feel secure in the relationship and you have someone you can bare your soul kind of thing too is, for me, was important. Because we were going at 1,000 miles an hour, and sometimes you get whiplashed and you need a hug.
Yeah,
You know, it makes a difference.
definitely. That's super interesting. Okay. So okay, no, that's super interesting.
So you're just going to make sure you hug a lot.
Yeah.
You know? Make sure he hugs you.
I think we covered a good amount. If someone wants to be successful in business, if you were to say you're closing, you know, last 20 to 30 seconds, what advice would you say to that person?
Focus on creating value. If you focus on creating value and you're acutely aware of what that value proposition is and what how your customer, your client, your audience, your partner, how they define it, and you're always having that discussion, the fulfillment is just terrific. We all make mistakes. We're all human. We all know that too. People are incredibly forgiving when there's a clear discussion about where we're going with this relationship, in business or personally. If you build that muscle and you build those kinds of relationships, life's a joy.
Absolutely. President Spinelli, it was a pleasure.
It's an honor as usual. You're very good at this.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for this. Wow.
All right, my friend.
Appreciate it.